Good day to all. Hopefully you can hear me and see the screen I'm sharing. Thank you for joining us again. Welcome to our fourth week of BEXEL Manager Online Education. I'm Mileta Pejovic, here with you again, BIM Manager at BEXEL Consulting. And today I'm teaching you how to manage your BIM projects using BEXEL Manager. For questions, use Q&A and I'll respond at the end. If some of you is with us for the first time, this is the 7th online session introducing you BEXEL Manager. And all the sessions will be recorded and sent to you afterwards. Also, at the end of the entire education program, all recorded sessions will be uploaded on YouTube. And the sample model which I'm presenting during these sessions will be also uploaded to our user area. So you can download it and use it for practice. Last week, I explained how to manage cost of your BIM project and how to make your cost estimates using BEXEL Manager Cost Editor. And we made a brief introduction into basics of 4D BIM and scheduling options. And you learned how to link your imported schedules and make construction simulations. And it was really, really basic. But today we're going even further, and I'll try to explain you how to entirely make feasible and optimize construction schedules in BEXEL Manager using our advanced scheduling engine. One of the benefits of using our platform is for scheduling, and instead of using traditional scheduling platforms, which are not BIM based, is that you can use all available information from the BIM models, use that model to accurately create your scheduling zones or phases, and optimize your schedules, tasks, activities based on resources and the real quantities from the same BIM model that you're using for scheduling. And our platform can help you to organize your schedules, to organize your task levels and relations. And based on these defined rules of activities, our engine automatically creates thousands of scheduled tasks which are linked together and which are automatically linked to 3D BIM model elements. So without further ado, let's dive into this part of BEXEL Manager. So again, we're gonna continue with the same BIM model that we used for the previous sessions, and progressively I've explained all the parts and all the aspects of BIM, how you progressively create and add some additional information, segregate your BIM models in order to use all this information for the scheduling options. But before that, let me just present you what is the goal for today's sessions. This is the final BIM model of these two sample buildings. And today, and hopefully after this session, you'll be able to do the same process and repeat the same methodology to create your own schedule for your own BIM project. So this is what we're gonna achieve today. We're gonna create a new schedule. Using our predefined creation templates for the scheduling. And we're doing that, the system will automatically create entire schedule with a lot of tasks and relations between these tasks, and automatically all these tasks will be related to 3D BIM model elements in order to create 4D simulation, but not just nice video of your schedule, but it's also accurate and feasible and also optimized schedule which you can use on your real construction projects. So this is the automatically generated schedule. I'm going to pop this window out so you can see what we achieved in just a few clicks, basically. So this is the schedule with all these tasks, with the relations between these tasks, and automatically we also have the line of balance, which we can organize in a different levels of view. And this is done automatically. And also, if we check the schedule animation, this is how the animation looks like. So hopefully, after today's session, you'll be able to do the same process for your own schedules. And of course, if we use the animation, this is the video of the schedule. So hopefully you're able to see this. So without wasting more time, this is what we're gonna do, and how to do it. We're gonna start from scratch. So basically, the main goal and main idea of BEXEL Manager as a scheduling platform is to create or unlike the other scheduling tools, which are used for different kinds of let's say scheduling types, for scheduling not just the construction buildings and the construction projects, but scheduling different types of works or work types. BEXEL Manager is actually BIM-based scheduling engine, and it means that it's oriented for construction. And because it's oriented for construction industry, therefore the flow line, or actually the main idea is to create something which will recreate or make your construction schedules and tasks and all your activities as much as possible efficient. And this is the main goal. So we're trying to recreate the same process which is commonly used in car industry, which is a lean process for optimized and efficient using of your resources and to create your activities. And sometimes it's much or always it's much better than creating just your, let's say, plans for Gantt chart purposes itself. And we are trying not just to create the Gantt chart and the list of your activities, but to create efficient and feasible schedule overall. And that's why we believe that also not just the Gantt chart, which I presented in a previous session, is important, of course, but also what is important is line of balance. So when we're talking about the construction industry, we need to have the line of balance or flow line view, because in the construction industry, all these tasks and the activities are organized in different zones and levels and phases. And this is something which is different from other industries. And that's why it's really, really important for quality and optimized schedules that you will create. So our system tries to create optimized schedule like an assembly line. And for this kind of scheduling method, we are using the methodologies and the zones. And zones and methodologies are the main, let's say, tools for creating and defining our scheduling methods. So these tools are positioned in the upper part of the window, and you can find them here within the tab schedule. You can see the zone editor, which is currently empty, and methodology editor, which is also currently empty. And we can create creation templates mixing these two tools and these created zones and methodology in order to create entire schedule. But before that, the start and what we see as a start for creating any kind of schedules, and the most importantly BIM-based schedules, is using already available information. So previously we explained how you can segregate your BIM model elements in different selection sets, Also, I've explained how the system or BEXEL Manager automatically segregates all B model elements automatically based on different buildings, based on different elevations or the stories. So we can check and hide and unhide these elements based on specific elevation or the story of the building. This is all automatically done. So if it's done automatically, why not use it? So BEXEL Manager allows you to use all these information without doing something additionally, which is commonly done in the traditional scheduling platforms, other traditional used scheduling platforms. And also what we believe is a start for any kind of scheduling process is basically the cost editor or any type of classification. So for a basic of your tasks and activities of the schedule, you usually use some kind of classification. And if you're using the same classification, which is usually project-based or even better company-based, or if you have some kind of classification which is used for entire country, then you can use the same classification and the systems for any type of the projects and always use the same and reuse it. And because of that, the workflows and also the order of these sessions are creating and presenting you how to create your cost estimation and then creating 4D and 5D simulations, because everything in our platform is related. So in order to explain it much understandable and much clearer for everyone, I'm gonna do it in few samples or examples. So this is the same building that we used on the previous sessions. And of course, we use some of the master format and uniformat classifications. And these are really complex, and they contain all different types of cost items organized in their own way according to the classification. But in this case, in order to make it much understandable for you, I'm going to create a quite simple cost estimation for just construction part of the building, for just the structural parts of the building, for concrete elements, and then create the schedule for that. And after that, I'm going to expand it to entire building. So I think it's going to be much understandable from the scratch. So I'm going to create new classification system. So this is something that you're typically doing on your projects. So you get your B model, and then you're creating some kind of classification system for cost estimation. If you have it, if you have already something that you use for all projects, it's even better. You can use it and then automatically create the schedule. But if you don't have it, if you're doing that for the first time, we're going to create new construction. And this is a classification for this part of structural elements. And of course, for this purpose, I'm going to demonstrate to you one new feature of BEXEL Manager. This is from the latest update. I'm going to create new cost classification system using the wizard from the quantity takeoffs. So I already have a few quantity takeoffs for the structural elements. And I'm going to create first one for the tasks or the elements which will be related to reinforcement and doing these types of activities using the QTO for structural reinforcement. And for the codes of these items, I'm going to use the option mark. You can use any property, and this is just for this presentation purposes. You can use it whatever you like from your properties of the elements, but I already have some defined properties, and I'm going to use it to create my cost classifications and cost items automatically from these quantity takeoffs. I have my structural reinforcement. I also have my structural concrete QTOs, and I'm using these types of segregation to create my cost classification and then cost version. So these are cost items. And if I select applicable elements, then you see the system automatically selects structural foundation reinforcement or the elements which can be related to this. And then again, I'm gonna add additional level of or additional items for the structural concrete elements. These are for the reinforcement. So I'm gonna use again quantity takeoff for structural concrete elements using again mark property as a code and price property for the price, unit price. And of course, in a real projects, you can additionally use any of these cost items and then edit these cost items, adding resources if needed. And then if you fully define your cost items with all resources, then you can use resources to optimize your created schedule. But for this demonstration purposes, I'm just gonna create this few cost items without resources, only with unit prices, and that's it. And because all these automatically generated with the queries, I can use the option auto assign to new cost version, and these automatically creates cost estimation for the structural parts of the building. So if we go to the assigned items, this is the price of my structural works based on this cost or based on this classification and these prices of the cost items. So if I select the elements which are included, so these are elements which are included in these cost items. So basically structural elements of these two buildings. And this is something that you usually do for any types of construction projects. You get your B model and then you're trying to anticipate the price, usually using some kind of classification. If you do that, this is a base for creating the schedule afterwards. So in order to use all these available information, you created cost estimation with a price, with the quantity of these elements. So if I select the elements, you automatically know what is the quantity of these elements, and then where these elements are positioned automatically. So why not use all this information? So how to do it? So if you have your cost estimation, then we can use methodologies and zone to create the basics or the structure of our schedule. So how it works, I'm gonna go to the methodology editor and explain you how this works and what is represents actually. So methodology is the window where you're defining the order of your items or the activities of your schedule and relations between these activities. So I'm going to create new methodology, which will be called, in this case, simple. Simple methodology, which will be related to our cost estimation or the cost version, or actually the cost classification of our classification that we used for cost estimation. So let me just shrink it a little bit. So we used this cost classification, which is called new construction, to link and calculate the price of these elements. This is the version, this is the cost version. I can rename this one. This is a new cost version based on new construction. And then within the methodologies, we used this cost classification to refer our future activities. So when we do this, when I created new methodology which is related to any cost classification system that we have in the BIM model, the system automatically creates this methodology which is related to this. In this part of the window, we can see the relations of these created methodology. It's related to the new construction classification and all these items. So now we can create the list of these activities and relation between these activities. So like as I've said, in the car industry, we can actually use this to organize the relations and the activities which will be used to create the schedule. So how it works, we can create new items. In this case, because we are automatically linking BIM model elements to our schedule items or activity tasks, we're gonna create new item linked. And then from the list of the items of this cost classifications that we use, new construction, we can choose the cost items which will be used for the defining our tasks and the activities. So we can do it in several ways. I'm gonna use all these cost items and hit OK. So the system uses and creates new, let's say, tasks based on these cost items. And automatically, when you click on any of these items, on the right part of the screen, you see that it's automatically linked to this cost item. And of course, I'm going to save it. And of course, because we created cost estimation, all these cost items are automatically linked to BIM model elements. So everything is related. So these cost items are related to BIM model elements. And of course, your methodology items are automatically linked with the cost items and with the BIM model elements automatically if you created your cost version. And here we're defining relations between these tasks. So of course, like in the car industry, we are trying to reproduce the same, let's say, workflow or the line of production, capturing, let's say, planning logic in order to create the relation of these activities. So it's like a virtual assembly line for construction site. So here you're creating the list and the workflow order of your activities and the tasks in the schedule. So of course, we first want to create or execute our reinforcement for foundations. So we're gonna find foundations. And of course, the first one is foundation reinforcement and then foundation concrete. And then of course, the next one is, in this case, because I'm trying to reproduce the planning logic, I'm gonna say that the next one are the beams, or actually the beam reinforcement, and then beams, or actually the concrete beams, concrete pouring for the beams. And of course, the next one is after that, pouring the or creating reinforcement and concrete pouring for the slabs. So we're gonna do this. And practically we are telling the system how these tasks will be related. Of course, any link, any type of, or actually any arrow, any types of relations that you currently create between these two tasks can be adjusted additionally. And this is something that I'm going to explain later on. So in the right part of the screen, when you click on this arrow, you see the type. So this one is finished to start. So after completing the reinforcement, we're going to start pouring concrete, and then reinforcement for the beams, and then pouring concrete, and so on. And all these types can be changed. So you have different types, start, finish, and based on type, automatically system change the color. So you can visually differentiate these types of relation. And of course, for any type, you can specify the lag between these two activities. And we also have additional options, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. So practically, we're creating the relations and the order of activities. So of course, after the completion of the slabs, we can execute the walls and let's say the columns at the same time. So we're going to create this kind of relation. And that's it. We can click the auto arrange, so the system rearrange these activities. So practically we created the relations. It's a workflow of these activities. And in order to make these tasks, which will be generated in this schedule, let's say more organized and understandable, I'm just gonna rename these cost items into something that is much understandable for me. So instead of using this automatically generated name based on the cost item name, I can use the option change this into manual and then rename these into, for example, foundation reinforcement, and then this is structural foundations, concrete pouring, and so on. I'm just gonna quickly try to rename these, but I think you can catch what is the process. First, you link your cost items to your tasks, and then you create your relations between these tasks, and then you can use these options to rename these tasks if you find it more understandable for the project. So if this is okay, I'm gonna quickly complete this, and then we can skip to the next step. So practically we used and create all the tasks which will be used for the structural concrete elements. So it's quite simple, and it's almost the same for any different type of the construction project with a few adjustments. But basically, this is a flow line for the construction. So you're always creating first foundations, and then the beams or the slabs, and then the walls and the columns. And depending on the type of your beam project, then you can have some additional, let's say, steel elements, or some different types of foundations, or different types of walls, and so on. But this is the way where you're specifying relations and the order of these activities within the methodology. And if it's okay, I'm going to save this simple methodology. And of course, we just created the tasks, but we didn't say how these tasks will be executed based on the actual physical position on your project. So that's why we can use this automatically created segregation based on the levels and based on the, let's say, buildings. And of course, if your project have specific phases or the zones, then you can create specific selection sets based on the properties within the elements of your B model, and then you can organize all your B model elements into the phases. So these are phase 1, 2, and 3. These are groups of the elements, and then we can use this segregation groups to tell the systems that these groups are actually zones for the methodology. And I'm gonna do this in order to make it understandable for everyone, just for the levels, for the first example. So I'm gonna go to the zone editor, And here we defining the zones for the building. So the first one will be levels. Of course, all tasks, all activities will be executed based on the stories of your building. So that's why I'm going to create a new zone, which will be called levels. And then I'm going to relate these levels to my building stories. And of course, we have two buildings, and I'm going to show you how we can manage this. For the start, I'm going to link these just for the building one. And automatically, because these are system-based segregation, based on the elevation, we can use this additional help, which says create relations, and then the system automatically tries to create relations between these levels, because every time when you're creating your schedule, you usually start from the lowest story and then going up to the top. And this is what system done automatically. And if we're satisfied with this, that's it. These two simple, let's say, um, levels of hierarchy of our future schedule are enough to create the first schedule. So we created methodology, we created zone, and then we're gonna create new schedule. This one will be called simple. And of course, because we are creating the schedule based on the cost estimation and the cost classification, here within the creating the schedule, we want to relate the schedule to the same cost version that we used for creating the methodology. We're going to create or actually link it to new cost version. So of course, when we did that, the system automatically creates new schedule, only one task. Basically, this is the name of the schedule, and the price, which is the same price as within the cost estimation. And of course, if we want to tell the system when our schedule is going to start, we can do that within the settings, and we can specify the starting date for the schedule. So I'm going to make it, for example, April, or let's say May, today or tomorrow actually. And we can specify how this schedule will be created initially. So by default, we creating the activities with the same durations. And this is something that we also want to point out. We are not trying to automatically create, and this is impossible basically, to create automatically schedule which will have different duration of different tasks based on resources and quantities of your elements, because it's not logical, because on a different types of your construction sites, you will have a different types of available resources. So instead of doing that type of impossible calculation, we are trying to tell the system to use specific pace for each task. And then based on the pace, you can adjust your resources on entire process in entire project. This is more important. And here we're gonna specify that default pace, which is 40 working hours or practically 5 working days. And of course, by default, I'm gonna set the default constraint priority as soon as possible. So if this is okay, I'm gonna hit okay, and automatically the schedule starts at this predefined date, 6th of May, and I'm gonna create my schedule, initial schedule using methodology and the zones. So how we do it? I'm gonna right click on our schedule and use the option new task creation wizard. So for the most optimal and the best workflow using the BEXEL manager for creating schedule, we usually using creation wizard. And this allows you to mix your methodology and zones in order to create the levels of hierarchy of your schedule. So right now, I'm gonna create new, let's say order or hierarchy levels of the schedule, which will be used to create tasks of the schedule. So for the first level of creation, I'm going to use methodology items, and this is the one which we created. And then I'm going to use the zones. So I'm going to select zone items and select my levels. So it means that the BEXEL manager will create entire schedule based on these tasks, which will be automatically segregated on different stories according to the relation specified in the zones. So if I hit OK, the system automatically creates schedule with the tasks. These are cost items used to create tasks. And then all these tasks are segregated into levels of the building. And of course, you see these relations created. And this is really simple. And I'm going to show you how this schedule looks like and which are the flows, current flows of this kind of schedule. So I'm going to go to the schedule animation. And in order to see all these elements and our schedule, we have to make sure that all the elements are visible and switch to schedule view. So I'm going to update the schedule and that's it. So if I play the schedule, I'm going to zoom it a little bit closer. So you see the tasks, the activities currently executed, you see the price and the date. These legends can be adjusted right here, but I'm not going to waste more time to explain this. Currently, you can use the online tutorials or a manual to check and get to know with all these options. So I'm going to just hit play to see what are current flows. So you see we created the schedule, but relations are first execute the foundation, then execute the beams, then execute the columns and the walls, or actually execute the slabs, of course, and then columns and walls. So the system does that. And of course segregates these based on the stories. So it's not good one. It's not nice schedule. So we obviously made some actually flaw, or we didn't define everything fully. So let's go to the methodology editor once again. And I'm going to explain you what is the difference, what we didn't created as we planned to. So here we created the relations between these two tasks, or all these tasks, but we didn't actually create relation which says after the completion of, let's say, beams on the base level, create the next tasks on the next level. So we didn't create that. So in order to copy all these relations to the next levels of the segregation of the schedule, which are in this current example are levels, I'm going to select all these relations, or before that, I can duplicate my methodology with relations, with so I'm copying my methodology. I'm not gonna edit this one. So that's why I'm duplicating this, and I'm gonna edit duplicate. So we're gonna select all these relations using the option select relation. And then within the type, I'm gonna copy these relations to the children. So it means that the system will copy these relations to the next levels of segregation of our schedule hierarchy. And of course, when we change or when we copied these to the next levels, the system changed the representation of these arrows, so it looks like a dashed arrow. And then, if I save this, I can create new schedule using this kind of methodology, but instead of just doing that, I'm gonna create additional zone of segregation. So here, we want to segregate all these elements, not according to the levels, but also according to the phases. So we're just gonna segregate the schedule even further. And of course, before I continue, let me just show you in this schedule, you see we just presenting only one building. And that's because within the zone editor, when we defined our levels, we just refer the linking of these tasks to the building one. So we can resolve this issue. So we can select all these tasks and add additional reference to the B model elements. So right here, I'm going to include the sub-level of the building 2. For this one, I'm going to include the entry level for the building 2. For this one, second floor of the second building. And we're going to do this for all levels of the building in order to see all construction elements from both buildings. And of course, system automatically creates the name. I'm going to fastly rename this sub So this is important because the system automatically creates your schedule based on these names. So it's much understandable for everyone who gonna use the schedule to rename it according to some logical names. And that's it. So if I save this, I can, before creating new schedule, I can update this one. And then the system tells you that it's gonna create new links with the additionally added zones of the schedule. So if I hit update and go to see my updated animation, you see now we are seeing the both buildings or elements for the both buildings. But again, the methodology is the same. First, executing foundations, then the beams, then the slabs, then the columns and the walls. So that's why we created or adjusted methodology by creating or copying these relations to the children. And then I'm gonna add additional level of hierarchy of my schedule, which will be phases. So instead of just using the levels, I'm gonna use selection sets for the phases. So practically these are phase 1, 2, and 3. And then if we segregate this even further, and this is something that BEXEL Manager scheduling engine will do automatically, we'll be able to see only these small part of the building, which is practically the lowest level of the schedule. Just one phase on one building story for specific activities. So I'm going to go back to the zones and define my phases. So I'm going to define phases using link rules. And instead of using building stories or building levels, I'm going to use selection sets. So I'm going to select these selection sets. And also based on the name, the system can create relations automatically. And then we can adjust these relations if we are not satisfied with this. And that's it. Again, you can specify the types of relations, specify the lag, and so on according to your process or according to your planning logic. So I'm going to save this zone And then we're gonna create new schedule. So this one will be called simple 2. Again, it's gonna be related to the same cost version. So when we create new schedule, again, we can specify the starting date. And we're gonna create new schedule using newly created methodologies and zones. So again, we can use creation wizard. And because we still don't have a lot of zones or methodologies, we can create new levels of hierarchy of our schedule, or we can use the template. I'm going to explain it next in the next example. So for now, I'm going to use again methodology, the previously created methodology with copied relations. And then I'm going to segregate these tasks according to the created zones, first according to the levels, and then according to the uh, phases. And I can hit OK. So now the system will create the schedule with the first level of hierarchy based on the tasks, and then these will be segregated based on the levels, and then additionally these will be segregated based on the phases. So when we hit OK, the system creates new schedule. And now you see all these segregated according to the levels and then according to the phases. And what is really important is that the system does this automatically. So if, for example, you don't have specific cost items or B model elements on specific story, the system is smart enough to create and relink these activities to the next activity, which is in the specified order. So for example, if we don't have columns on the next level, then the BEXEL manager will automatically link the slabs to the, let's say, walls, or to the next level of elements of your building. And now when we check, for example, line of balance, because we already have a little bit more zones of segregation, you already see these activities. When you click on each of these activities, you can see the information about these activities and duration. And it's already looks a little bit better. And of course, when these activities in the flow line are presented as a dashed line, it means that we have several activities overlapped, for example. And in this case, we have a structural columns reinforcement and structural walls reinforcement at the same time on the same phase of the same entry level. And this is something that we specified in our methodology, because we said at the same time execute the columns and the walls. So I'm going to pop in and go to schedule animation to see currently created simulation. Again, I have to show all the elements and then hit play. So now you see the elements are executed based on the phases. So this is the phase 1, this is the phase 2, this is the phase 3, and then slabs. And then it's already much better. But again, we see a little flow because our beams are still executing before the columns. So what's the issue? There are several ways how to resolve this. And it depends on the way how you created your beam model. So in this case, we created the beams which are at the entry level, and we also have the columns at the entry level. So basically the system does as we specified. It creates the beams and the slabs on the entry level and then the columns. But it's not something that we want to do. because we believe that first these columns and the walls supposed to be executed, and then these columns, even though these are these beams, even though these beams are for the second floor, and these columns are for the entry level. So that's why I'm gonna go again to my methodology and repair this. And after this, we're gonna get the feasible and good schedule. So I'm gonna go back to the methodology, and again, I'm gonna duplicate this methodology and call it constructive. So what we are gonna do now, we see that there's an issue with presenting or actually executing the structural columns and the beams. So what we are gonna do, we're gonna create relations which will say we want to execute the columns of the previous level of segregation, in this case, levels of the store or the stories of the buildings before the beams or reinforcement of the beams on the next level. So now I'm going to create this kind of relation. And because it looks like, I don't know, some kind of circular relation, it's not, because the system automatically, when you try to do this, automatically check this type of relation as constructive. And of course, by default, constructive offset is 1. I'm going to explain a little bit later what this means, but it means basically that these columns has to be executed on the one level before, then the beams on the next level starts. If we specified constructive offset 2, it means that the construction columns supposed to be executed, and then the beams on the second story supposed to be start. So this is what the constructive offset means. And I think it's going to be much clearer when we execute this methodology once again. So I'm going to save this. We just created this simple type, and this is really unique type of relation that we created because we saw that it's usually supposed to be done in this way for constructive elements. Basically, for all structural elements, you want to specify this kind of relation. And then if we save this methodology, we can execute the same, or we can create new schedule executing this new methodology, or we can create additional levels. And before that, this is really important when I specify the methodology and specify this new way of relation, and this is the constructive one, we have to specify which is related to this constructive type of relation. So we have to tell the system that it refers to the levels of our building. So now I'm going to go to my zones and select my levels and tell the system that levels are actually constructive level of hierarchy which will be used to segregate the elements and the tasks according to that. And of course, if we want to segregate even further our schedule, we can use, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to create new level of segregation of our schedule based on the buildings. So in a previous schedule, you saw that both buildings are executed at the same time. So here we're going to create new levels of segregation. And I'm going to specify that for these types of segregation, we're going to use buildings. And automatically we can create relation. And this means that the first building will, or actually the second building will start when the first building is completed. But we don't want that kind of schedule. We want to say in this case that these two buildings will start at the same time, but for example with specific lag. And I'm going to specify 200, or actually for 160 working hours, which means approximately 4 months after this building starts. And I'm gonna save this. So now, instead of creating new schedule, and we're gonna call this one simple 3, again, it's related to the same cost version. Instead of using and creating the same method of creation using the creation wizard, I'm gonna use creation template because we have a lot of zones now. So I'm gonna create new creation template. And this is where we're specifying the segregation levels of or segregation hierarchy of the schedule. So again, we're gonna use methodology items, and then we're gonna use this last one, methodology with constructive relations. Then again, we're gonna segregate this according to the zones. First, in this case, we want to segregate everything according, again, based on the levels, and then according to the phases. And we added new zone items, which are buildings. So in this case, we want to move or shift buildings as the first level of segregation. So we're gonna have the schedule based on the building 1 and 2, and then all these tasks will be segregated further according to the methodology. So this template will be called the simple template. And hit OK. So now, whenever we creating new schedule, we can use the template. So we don't have to create new rules, we can use the template. And then the system will automatically create new schedule. I'm gonna pop this one out so you can see how it looks like. We didn't specify the start date, so it starts at this point. I can change this. So it starts at specified date, and then if we expand it, the first levels of segregation is the tasks, and then levels, and then phases. And again, you see additional relations. So now we can check our beams and the let's say structural columns. So you see relations, and here you see the columns are executed before the beams on the second level. So if I update, we're actually just gonna pop this in and go back to my schedule animation, update, and then play this one, you'll be able to see the schedule that we created. And this one is actually a good one. So here we executing building 1, and then with specified leg, the building 2, based on the zones and based on the levels. And this is how you see this one looks accurate, and it's not just accurate, it's feasible and it's efficient. So if I go back to schedule editor and go to the line of balance, you can see how this line of balance looks like now. So it's almost perfect but these are just the structural elements. So I think this is really, really clear. And now you can understand how the system actually works, how the scheduling engine works. And now we're going to the next step or the next level. So if you have the large number of your activities, and this is what is usually done. So you usually have your architecture and MEP tasks, and you have the cost estimation based on, let's say, Uniformat or any other classification system with hundreds of the cost items. you can use this to create your methodology. And then if you do this, I'm gonna skip to my previously presented sample at the start. So this is the sample from the start. This is a fully defined BIM project with a methodology which is based on uniformat cost classification. So if we go to check the reference is referenced to the uniformat, and then all these tasks are referenced to the uniformat cost items, and we have a large number of these items and relations between these. And then once you specify this, if you, for example, using the same classification system for the next projects, you can reuse it. So I'm going to show you how to reuse it. I'm going to export this. In order to use it for, I'm going to export selection sets, for example, methodologies, zones, creation templates, and cost classifications in order to use it in the similar project. Or in this case, I'm going to use it for the same project, because in this case, we don't have that much time to present you how to create the entire methodology with and link them with all these cost items. I'm going to reuse it. So I'm going to import all these, or actually export for the first time, all these from my completed project and reuse it in this sample. So I'm gonna import this, exporting this exchange of the information, which included schedule, methodologies, zone items, cost estimate, cost classifications, and selection sets, only because we had zones. That's why we included selection sets. We could use it without that. So when it's completed, I can go back to my sample model, which have only these three methodologies for structural concrete elements, and then we can exchange the information from this previously exported. So I'm going to go to exchange, import, use this, and once it's imported, because it's the same building, we can specify the sources, and these are the same sources for the building, and hit OK, use selection sets, methodology, zones, creation templates, and cost classification. So now when we do this, the system imports everything. We have our uniformat updated with all queries, and we can do auto assign to new cost version. System applies this. And once it's applied, we're gonna get the cost estimation. Sorry, I forgot to use the uniformat. So let me just use uniformat updated, because our methodology is actually created based on uniformat codes. We could use the master format, but in that case, you have to specify master format as cost classification. So I'm going to do auto assign cost items to new cost version again. So the system links elements and cost items. So once it's completed, I can go to my assigned items. It's assigned right now. I can edit the name. New uniformat cost version. You see the price. And then we can go back to the methodology, which is fully defined based on the same uniformat classification. We see all relations, and we also see the same construction methodology or constructive type is used for the columns and the walls, and also in this specific um, example, we had additional constructive type, which is related to our facade. So let me just find this. So we have our curtain panels, and we had, let me just find it, curtain walls framing, and we have constructive relation, which says -2. So it means when the beams are completed on the second story, then the curtain walls can start. So this means when you provide the constructive with a negative offset. And now I'm gonna create a new schedule with imported methodologies. So I'm gonna go to my new schedule. And here we're gonna use new uniformat cost, which we assigned in a few minutes ago. And again, the schedule will be created and we can specify the starting date. If we go to the Gantt chart, we can specify the starting date. And then we're gonna apply new template, which will be this one, which we imported with the very advanced methodology. And if we hit OK, the system will automatically create hundreds or the thousands of tasks depending on the size of your building. So right here you see the timeline of your Gantt. If we expand all these, you see hundreds of tasks with all relations, and this is the main benefit. So the system automatically creates all these tasks with all relations. In other scheduling tools, which are not related to BIM, you had to do it manually for each task. Here the system do it and finds the optimum and most efficient way to do it based on your methodology. And then if we go to the line of balance, we can check the line of balance. And of course, we can do some adjustments, and I'm going to do that as well. But before that, let me just present you how the schedule looks like now, or how the 4D simulation looks like now. And of course, you see some site preparation works. So we can easily go, because these are actually excavation, I can go to my Gantt chart, select these two elements, find these in the task, and then edit the way how these are going to be presented. So within the settings, I can change this to demolition. So instead of presenting these are going to be demolished, or actually these are going to disappear. And also I'm going to pop out once again. All these schedules are automatically, or all these tasks are automatically related with the BIM models because you used relation links. And then if I go to my task editor, we can see all information about this task. We can see the time, but we can also see relations between other activities. the rules which are used to create this schedule, and then we can see the cost. And these costs are took from the elements which are related to this task. So you see the cost, you see the quantities and resources. So you can see how many resources are necessary to execute these activities or these tasks. And then we see the activities, of course. And then similarly as in the other scheduling tools, you see the properties which can be presented as specific columns in the Gantt view. So if I hit OK, I can present you additional columns, for example. I can add column for the days, duration in days, or the columns, for example, late start, or let's say late finish. So you can see all these columns, all these information are automatically available. And if we pop this in and update the schedule once more, this is how the schedule looks like now. So let's start from the start. So these are executed, and then everything according to the methodologies and the zones. And then you'll be able to see all these. Now you see the facade starts when the second level of construction is completed. And of course, we can easily adjust resources because all these information are available. So right here, I can select and use the option to level my resources. So if I select my building one and check my task report, we can see the cost, we can see the labor and the equipment. So we see some peaks of labor and equipment, and we can easily repair this. So using the option leveling resources, we can tell the system to optimize duration of these specific tasks based on available resources. So if we know, for example, that for the building one, we only have let's see again for these resources. So these are glazers, and there's a lot of glazers peaks in specific period, and also for pile drives and carpenters as well. We can specify to organize or actually level resources. So I'm going to use the option level selected resources for selected part of the schedule. So for the building one, we can select resources which we want to optimize from the list of resources. And I'm going to choose my carpenters, glazers, and pile drivers. Hit OK and say that, for example, the maximum available number of resources are 12 for carpenters and let's say 12 for glazers and only 2 pile drivers machines. And then I can hit OK, analyze this, and then apply. So the system will automatically change duration of these tasks. So you see that the date is changed. And then if we go to task report, the resources are according to specified maximum allocation. And again, we can do the same thing for the second building. And then we can almost instantly do the perfect resource leveling in just a few clicks. So again, this is the 12 per building. Okay, analyze, and apply. So now the system is the schedule is actually optimized. If we go to the line of balance, pop it out, you see a little bit changed because the resource allocation. And then if I play the schedule, you'll be able to see the new schedule, how it looks like, or new 4D simulation. So basically, this is how the system works. And one of the most important thing is that everything is integrated. So once you create your cost classification and create your cost estimation, so if you have your cost classification with a specified resources, the system will create, or you can define your methodologies based on classifications and cost items, and then the system will automatically create entire schedule with the hundreds of tasks and the relations between these tasks, and everything will be related with the resources based on available quantities and resources extracted from the BIM model. And this is the main benefit. And that's why you're supposed to, and it's the best ways to use BIM scheduling, BIM-based scheduling engine, such as BEXEL Manager, to create this kind of schedule. So now you have entire schedule, and you can easily change and adjust your activities according to your needs or according to specific project. And one of the best benefits, of course, is use of the available cost classifications and methodologies for the different projects. And let me just briefly show you this for how you can use this for a totally new project. If you're a large construction company, or if you're a large subcontractor, and you're always using the same classification, and you always have the same BIM execution plans, and your subcontractor actually develops the BIM models in the same way with the same properties added to these elements, then you can use all these information to the next project. So let me just explain you this. You remember that we exported the methodologies and uniformat classification in order to import it in this sample building, because it was really, really time consuming to reproduce this kind of creating methodology and relations between these tasks in this short period of time. So I'm just imported it. And of course, because these are related to uniformat, that's why you have all resources, because all these cost items are actually created. If I go to my cost item, any of items, you see that all cost items are actually created using resources. That's why we had all these information in the schedule, all these resource information. So if you have this kind of classification and you're always using the same methodology to create your building, I'm going to open new project. And this is the new project, which is created from the IFC files. So let me just show you this. This is a new project. This is a new building, high-rise building. We have a lot of sources. We have 3 IFC sources, but these are segregated in the same way. So we always have that's why we can use the same methodology and zones, because the entire project is used or created using the same type of BIM model segregation. So we have structural BIM model, mechanical, and architectural. And these are from the IFC files. So you see the properties are related to the IFC properties as well. And here we don't have anything. We don't have the cost. We don't have any cost estimation. We don't have any zones. no methodology, nothing is created, but entire project is created using the same BIM execution plan. So we can use the segregation and the methodologies and the zones from the previous project. And also something which is really, let's say, common error when it comes to the IFC files or exporting the files from the Revit into IFC is that the segregation of these elements according to the levels of the building is not always perfect, because I know that facade as curtain wall is always related to the base level. So now I'm going to use the option which BEXEL Manager has to auto-distribute these elements which are not properly distributed according to the levels, because we need this kind of segregation because we're using it to the schedule. So I'm going to use the option auto-distribute. That's it. So the system reorganize distribution of the elements, and then we have the elements segregated accurately, and then I'm going to import the entire exchange of the information. So I'm going to use the same exchange methodologies. And right here we can specify the sources, because these previous had two buildings, but our BIM model actually has only one building. We can match it to just sources according to the name. And that's it. So we can import the zones, methodologies, templates, and cost classification, hit OK. So once it's completed, now you are able to see the entire methodology is created, is the same one that we used for the previous sample, with all these types and relations of the activities. We also have the zones, and this is something that we have to correct, and this is the only thing which we have to do. So in this previous project, we only had the building which have 3 levels and the roofs. And in this current project, we have a lot of building stories. So now, instead of using these levels from the previous project, I can delete this and import, or actually create new linked zones for the levels based on the current stories. And I can also create relations automatically. System does that. And then we can change the names if it's needed, but for this short presentation, I'm going to leave it as it is, save. And because our creation template is created using the same zones and methodologies based on the buildings, methodology, building levels, and construction sequences, we can use it to create new schedule. But before that, we have to tell the system that all these elements from the building are related to our uniformat classification, which is used to create methodology. So again, I'm just going to use the option auto assign cost version for entire project. Once it's completed, I can go to assigned items, check what's the price, and see what the elements are actually included. So everything is linked. We see the price for entire project. We can check it here with the assigned, unassigned elements. Everything is green, which means everything is assigned. We can select the elements just to make sure that everything is assigned. So these are substructure. These are, for example, shell. So everything works as we planned, and then we can easily create entire schedule. Just with one click, create new schedule. high-rise schedule using the auto-assign currently. We created auto-assign, hit OK. This is the cost version which we used, and then the system creates new schedule. So we're gonna create, so this is the name of the schedule. We can specify when the schedule is gonna start, and we're gonna execute entire schedule using the predefined creation template which we imported. And then the system will create entire schedule for 17 building story high-rise office building. So basically we open the project, and just within a few minutes we can have entire cost estimation and schedule, which is not just any kind of the schedule. This is really optimized schedule. I'm going to show you the line of balance as well. This is the created schedule. With hundreds of tasks. So if I expand everything, you see how long this schedule is. And all relations are automatically created, and all task has its own resources and the price, because it's related to cost estimation, quantities, of course. And within the line of balance, this is how the schedule looks like. I'm gonna pop it in just to briefly show you the schedule, or for the simulation. Hit play within the schedule view. Of course, we have to update it and then play. So I'm gonna just go a little bit closer. And that's it. So this is the main benefit, or actually there's no other traditional scheduling tool can do this kind of schedule and create automatically the tasks and the relations between the tasks, and also relations between B model elements according to it. And of course, we can additionally adjust this entire schedule by selecting all these tasks. I can select all my leaf tasks from the schedule using the option select leaf tasks, and then using the option to set all these constraints as late as possible. All the activities, all the tasks will be pushed a little bit further in order to be on the critical path. So if I apply this, you see everything is on a critical path, and automatically line of balance is adjusted. So this is almost perfect schedule, almost the most efficient way of constructing your schedule. And of course, if we see updated schedule animation, this is the way how it looks like. And of course, we can create the animation. So we can orbit a camera around the building itself. So right here, we're going to create new keyframe, and then right here it's going to be so while I'm playing this, let me just check if you have some questions. It took a little bit more time, but hopefully it's much understandable now. I try to explain how the system actually works in a really simple example, and then trying to reproduce the same thing in more advanced samples. because otherwise I think it's not really understandable how the system works and how complex it is and how you can use all these information from the existing BIM model in order to create automatically all the tasks and the activities without using and doing something manually. So let me just check your questions. And of course, if you have some additional questions, I'll try to respond to that as well. I saw that my friends are actually responded to most of your questions. Let me just check if something there I can show you. Uh, what about elements that must be planned not by level, like facade or curtain walls that you mount by facade, not by level? Of course, you can do that as well. So you can specify this as specific zones, which are not, will be related to your levels. And of course, I just presented the best workflow, which actually creates the best schedule, or let's say the most efficient schedule. But of course, there is a lot of work around and different ways how you can create your schedules. So you can create different types of the schedules without even need to create uh, without even need to use all these, let's say, zones or methodologies. You can use the option to create the schedule partially using creation rules and selecting specific methodologies and zones one by one, and then assigning uh, additional levels of segregation additionally. Let me just present you, it's not the perfect way, but just for presentation purposes, I'm gonna create new link rule reference on the, let's say, um, methodology of my office building, hit OK. And then the system creates a lot of tasks, but then we can select for example, facade, curtain walls, and curtain wall panels, not to segregate additionally to the levels, but for example, based on the phases. So we can create new reference children-based relations and use zone items not by the levels, but based on the phases. And that's it. So the system creates these automatical relations and the tasks, and these are not related to the levels. And then we can add the levels for all these activities. But this is something that takes more time and more, let's say, expertise to adjust the relations and uh, the durations for all these tasks if you do it this way. The best workflow is to create your methodology and template and then use the methodology and the zones for entire project. Is there an option to define which side, left or right, first will start? Yes, I forgot to mention that in the previous session, and also for each of these tasks, once they created, or even for the parent task, you can go to the task edit, and then within the settings, here in this window, you can specify how these elements will be presented in the animation. So by default, it's done automatically, but here we can change and we can specify the element ordering from left to right, from center to the side, which are the primary direction and so on. And this is something for the more advanced visual representation of the schedule. So you can play with these settings additionally for each task. Can you define manpower or production rate? Yes, of course, you can specify within the task editor, you can specify and do the resource allocation for each task. So this is what is available. And if you actually change duration or change the resource allocation for this selected task, you can change this and provide the available allocation. Will we see look-ahead plans export? Yes, I can. I'm going to present that tomorrow, because tomorrow we explaining how you can create progress entries, progress report, and how you can actually compare planned and actual schedules. Of course, we can create different types of look-ahead plans. One of the look-ahead plans or ways how you can do it, if we go to the schedule, current schedule, and go to the schedule animation, we can change the option how this animation will be presented, and instead of daily, we can change this to weekly or monthly, and hitting OK, the elements which are presented are on a monthly base. So these are the elements at the end of each month. And then we can easily select the elements for specific period of time and then provide that kind of selection sets. Or now maybe I can show you additional, let's say, add-in or the use of our API, which can be used to create and assign cost and schedule information to your B model elements. So if you have your schedule, and of course this one is related to cost estimation, let me do it on this smaller building because it's going to take some time on this high-rise building. I'm going to go back to this sample building, save this one, save before we apply this script, and then I'm going to show you how you can use the API in order to assign specific properties related to the cost and time when this specific element is supposed to be executed. So now I'm going to use the API console and use some script that we already have developed, and some of these scripts will be also published to our user area, so you'll be able to download it. I'm going to load the script. This is the one. And I'm going to apply this. So this is the script which actually creates new property and write down the value to each element when these elements supposed to be, when is start date and finish date for execution of that element, and what's the price of that specific element. So if I execute the script using the option execute, the system will create new properties, and I'm going to show you these properties which can be used to some kind of look ahead plans as well. So if I select any of these elements and go to the properties, you see the new group of the properties, which is called schedule, is created. And then we see the finish date for selected element, start date, and the total cost for these selected elements. If I change the elements I'm currently selecting, we see the finish and the start date. And it works for all the elements. And then you can export these properties, and you can export even IFC files, which includes not just the properties, but it also includes the schedule and quantity takeoff information. And this is really something unique for the BEXEL Manager, because if you export IFC4 files, in checking export schedules and quantity takeoffs, it means that you can import this IFC file for, and then all these information related to the cost and estimation can be also loaded in your project. So hopefully I finished for today's session. It really took some time, but hopefully I hope that actually I explain it in understandable way, and then you can try to do it yourself in your projects. And also I have to repeat once again, I'm gonna share these sample models after the completion of these sessions. So I think next Wednesday or next Thursday, all these BIM models will be uploaded on our user area, so you can download them and practice on them. Thank you very much. If you don't have any more questions, thank you and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.